Welcome to another episode of Discovering the Book of Mormon through Science and Exploration. In our previous three videos on the geography of the Book of Mormon, we saw that the geography of Peru matches perfectly with the geography described in the Book of Mormon. However, there's another feature that's required of the land of the Nephites. That is a harbor where a ship could be constructed, launched, and returned to. Does Peru have such a harbor? The answer is yes, and it's located exactly where it's described in the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon people of the Promised Land had a long maritime tradition, starting with the fact that they traveled the many waters to reach their new homelands. Having achieved such a feat, and having been in a land with four seas, it is unlikely that the Nephites would have become landlocked. The strongest evidence for an ancient and sustained maritime tradition in the Americas takes us to South America. The Spanish explorer Cabello Balboa, the great-nephew of Velasco Balboa, who discovered the Pacific for the Europeans, wrote that according to the legend of the Incas, in primordial times, the Peruvian coast was invaded by a people from the sea in a fleet of balsa or rafts. The Jaredites came to the New World in 8 barges. They were shipbuilders, Ether 2:16, whose home of origin invented the sail and had a long legacy of building large ocean-going balsa vessels. Through the legacy of Hagoth, we know that the Nephites and perhaps the Lamanites kept alive their knowledge of ocean-going sailing and also of the construction of large sailing ships. We also know that by the time Columbus reached the New World, the Peruvians were still sailing the oceans in balsa ships. The first encounter the Spaniards had with the Incas was, quote, in the form of an Inca ship sailing near Ecuador, 300 miles from their home port, under a load of fine cotton sail. The Inca balsa had a crew of 20 and was easily the size of a Spanish gabelle, end quote. When the Spanish ship encountered the Inca ship, it was the first sign that an advanced and wealthy civilization existed further south in Peru. Aboard the Inca balsa ship, the Spanish found, quote, many pieces of silver and gold and personal adornments, including breastplates, tweezers, and rattles, and strings of clusters of beads and rubies, mirrors decorated with silver, and cups and other drinking vessels. They carried many wool and cotton mantles and Moorish tunics, and other pieces of cloth covered with cochineal, crimson, blue, yellow, and all other colors, and working with different types of ornate embroidery in the figure of birds, animals, fish, and trees. They had some tiny weights and weight gold, end quote. When asked where the Inca ship was going, the Spanish were told that it was going far out in the ocean to islands on a trading mission. In the 1st century BC, the Nephite homeland was a place of great fear. The Lamanite wars had driven the Nephites toward the sea. The great city of Zarahemla had fallen to the Lamanites. Wicked people prevailed, and the righteous were persecuted. During these precarious times, quote, an exceedingly curious man, end quote, named Hagoth built a very large ship. So fine was the vessel, and so difficult was life in the Promised Land in his time, that it seems Hagoth had no shortage of volunteers willing to sail away with him. Behold, there were many of Nephites who did enter therein, and did sail forth with much provisions, and also many women and children, and they took their course northward. A year later, Hagoth returned and built more ships and took more colonists northward. However, he was not the only shipbuilder at that time. Another man built a ship and perhaps followed Hagoth's instructions for traveling north. As the Nephite civilization developed, They built ships large enough to transport timbers from the land bountiful to the land northward. So extensive was the Nephite shipbuilding industry that Mormon made a note in the Book of Mormon to explain that his account did not include 100th part of the proceedings of this people and their shipping and their building of ships. In other words, there must have been a significant ocean-going shipbuilding industry on the part of the Nephites. Since 1851, LDS church leaders have taught that Hagoth's people helped colonize Hawaii using images drawn on Pre-Columbian Inca ceramics and also of additional Polynesian craft design. The Andean explorer Jean Savoy constructed a replica of an ancient Peruvian vessel. To the degree that it would have matched the design of Hagoth's ships, we can only speculate. After a 42-day voyage without a motor, Savoy and his crew of 7 successfully completed their passage from Callao, Peru, to Radio Bay in Hilo, Hawaii. Savoy proved that the pre-Columbian South Americans had the technology to reach Hawaii from Peru. One significant geographical requirement appears to put in question anywhere north of South America as having been the place where Hagoth set sail, apparently to Hawaii. He sailed northward, which would have been the case from Paracas, Peru. The west coast of South America in the southern hemisphere is the only place in the western hemisphere where a ship would have to sail northward to reach Hawaii. Hawaii is 20 degrees north latitude. To sail from Yucatan at 21 north latitude, one would need to sail westward. From Ohio, Hagoth's story would have been sheer nonsense. Hagoth first would have had to have traversed 2,000 miles of wilderness, then built a ship in a foreign land surrounded by foreign people, and then sail south, not north, over 20 degrees latitude to reach Hawaii. Hagoth and others launched ocean-going boats into the Pacific, vessels with the capacity to take settlers and their provisions to far-off islands must have been large and strong enough to withstand the forces of the open seas. Such boats require a sheltered harbor with calm waters for their construction, launching, conducting of sea trials, and to have had a safe harbor to return to. Hagoth launched his first ship near the borders of the land of Bountiful, and by the land Desolation, and by the narrow neck of land. From Lima, Peru, which the Incas called the land of the people of Desolation, it is only 161 miles to the natural harbor at Paracas, Peru. From the Uran Valley, the narrow neck of land, it is only 130 miles to Paracas. The Bay of Paracas is the largest natural harbor in Peru. Hagoth sailed the Pacific around 55 BC. After his first voyage was successful, he returned, built more ships, and took more colonists to the Pacific Islands. This raises a question. How did Hagoth find his way back to his original harbor? Resting on a hillside just outside the entrance to the Paracas harbor and along the Pacific shores is a giant geoglyph called the Candelaria. The LDS missionaries refer to it as the Tree of Life. Using pottery found at the geoglyph, archaeologists determined that it was constructed around 200 BC. One theory archaeologists hold is that it was used by ancient mariners sailing along the Pacific shore to find the entrance to the Paracas harbor. The geoglyph is 600 feet tall and can be seen 12 miles out to sea. Was it the ensign that led Hagoth and other Nephite mariners back to the land of Bountiful and to the harbor of Paracas? I believe it was. Discover more about the Book of Mormon by subscribing to this channel. Or you can visit our website, christinperu, that's one word, .com, where you can learn about our books and our annual tours to Peru. Thank you.